Great to have you here. Thanks, everybody. And I am the presentation, so there is no slides or video. Quick opening thought is the 800 or so people in this room are part of an ecosystem that over the last 25 years has built some of the world's greatest companies and the world's greatest technologies. So 25 years ago is about when the World Wide Web was born. And a couple of companies in the United States monetized that particularly well. You just heard from one, which was Amazon, and the other one with Google. And they basically understood that we were living in a connected world. And in that particular era, it was a page connecting to a page. And on a page connected to a page, if you had a fantastic algorithm, it turned out to be Google. And if it turned out to be something about commerce, it turned out to be Amazon. About 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago, there was a second connected age where we were connecting to each other with social networks and connecting to everybody and everything with phones. Two companies did particularly well there. Facebook, which you heard from earlier today, and Apple, which currently is in hiding but will come out soon, okay, as they have come out at CES. So you have, and those are another two very valuable companies. And now we're on the cusp of the third connected age, where three key things will happen. Data will connect to data, which will be AI. Things will connect to things, which will be IoT. And there'll be new ways for us to connect, of which voice, of which Alexa, Google Assistant, and others are big things. So we're at the cusp of probably an amazing another era of wealth creation. What you may not know is that the global trade value of data flows is greater than the global trade values of merchandise already. So that's how big it is. So everything is rosy, excepting over the last 1,000 days, something has been building up, which will probably slow things down unless we as an industry change. And those things are first and foremost the erosion of trust. It began with actually a lot of the companies in this room, which were marketers were worried about where were their dollars going. So they first began with the tech companies and said, something is off. Then they decided to move to the agencies and said, you all are liars and thieves. Then they decided to go to the platforms and say, we don't trust you. And this was part of an overall breakdown in trust across the world. Richard Edelman, every year at Davos, does a trust barometer. And he did a trust barometer again this year. And interestingly, everything is not trusted. Government is not trusted. The people actually end up trusting business more than they trust anything else. And they expect business to stand up and lead into the future. Most of the people in this room, outside of a few, are businesses. So either we take the world into the future, or there will be not a future. We'll always have a future, but not probably a very good one. So that's the real issue. So one is trust. The second is some major, major society issues. The key society issues are basically the rise of nationalism, which increasingly can be blamed to social media. So I work for a French company, and the entire yellow vest thing, which happened in Paris, which included defacing the Arc de Triomphe, also twice destroyed, or not destroyed, but really affected the Publicis store downstairs. And without a doubt, it was basically incited by social media. So to a great extent, the technologies that we have put forth are neither good or bad, but people make it so. But a lot of the people who have driven forth this can best be described not only as smart and brilliant, but two other words, naive and Pollyannish. They believe they can recode human beings. You can't. People are people. And technologies that basically believe that they can achieve an overall good just because they're a technology is not going to do that, because people will use technology the way they want to. So there is a massive, massive both nationalism and also another big issue, which is inequality. Oxfam does a study at Davos that basically showed that the 50% of the poorest people lost money over the last 10 years, while the top 1% tripled. At some particular stage, people are going to say, what the shit's going on, right? And they're going to basically vote. Part of it is it's very interesting when I hear people, let's replace human beings with machines. Who's going to buy your products and services? Machines won't. And these are some very interesting issues that we face. The answers to these are very complex, but an answer that we have to think about in our industry is to change our focus. Our focus and everything, including current FTC laws, are built on, does it help or harm a consumer? I'd like to put forth the hypothesis that we should switch this to, does it help or hurt the citizen? Because I believe consumers are just a part of being a citizen. Because if the only thing you were doing is consuming, then at some particular stage, you are worthless to most people. When I tell people that a lot of companies say they want to have a relationship with us. Well, I happen to be on the side of companies that understand how this works. So we want to have relationships with people who have high lifetime value. Can you imagine if you had a relationship with your cousins, friends, children because of lifetime value? The reality of it is, I'm only worth something. You want to have a relationship with me because I have money. And when I don't have money, you don't want to have a relationship with me. As a consumer, you think I'm a cow. You send messages and you milk my udder, and when I'm dry, you throw me away. The reality of it is, people are getting smart. And because they're getting smart, focusing on the consumer makes no difference. I had the opportunity to speak to people at Amazon, and someone asked me, what do you think of Amazon? And I basically said, look at my email address, and look at my Twitter handle. And one was called @Rashad, the other one is Rashad at Gmail. So I said, obviously, I'm an early adopter. And I actually was using Amazon before most of you people were born in the room. This is a young crowd, okay? Therefore, I love Amazon as a consumer. I have deep questions about Amazon as a citizen. And I said, there's going to be a backlash, and this was about 6 weeks ago, and the backlash has begun, including why do they have to talk to 260 cities to get data when they end up in obvious 2 cities that everybody thought they'd end up in. At some particular stage, you can't be so smart and so cute that you are stupid. I'm not calling any of these companies stupid, but at some particular stage, the way people treat us is just because you've got lots of wealth and you've got a lot of network effects, you think the rest of us are dumb. We are not. And that's what people are fighting back. Because we're focusing on consumer, we're saying, look, we look after you, we'll do things faster, better, cheaper, so just leave us alone. That's not the way the world works. And because of that, the smartest companies in the world are starting to switch, and their employees are starting to switch. So why should we think about human beings as overall human beings and citizens and not just consumers? The first is, we all talk about authenticity. Being a human is authentic, being a machine is not. So if you want to basically think broadly, think human, which is number one. Number two is increasingly, the leading companies talk about things like ESG, environmentalism, sustainability, governance. They talk about values, they talk about purpose. Those have to basically fit broader than a consumer. You cannot explain a lot of these things just on maximizing short-term quarterly balance sheets. So if you want to do ESG, and you want to do values and purpose, and you want to maximize quarterly earnings, it can't be done. You can maximize lifetime value of your corporation with those, as companies who invest in these start to differentiate themselves. And finally, what's particularly interesting is many of the modern companies that are doing increasingly well, whether it's the Warby Parkers of the world or others, have actually not just a direct-to-consumer edge, because eventually everybody will have a direct-to-consumer edge. They happen to have one of these other edges, a purpose-driven edge, an ESG edge, or something else. And so, in effect, as an industry, we have to recognize that if we just focus on the plumbing, we're going to lose the poetry. And it's the poetry that actually differentiates. It's actually poetry that differentiates brands. And the truth of it is, outside of a few, like maybe a Google, maybe an Amazon, maybe a Facebook, no one is going to be able to create a moat just because they are network scaled and technology driven. Impossible. All of that stuff is going to be available as a service. So something else is going to have to separate. And so the latter part of my talk is what are some of those things and how do we do it? So there are three broad areas. The first area is how do you get back trust? Because if you don't solve on trust, you don't get anything. And speaking again of this Edelman study, which I read, they have 4 definitions of what makes trust, which I thought was really good. One is capability, which is I'm going to trust someone who actually is capable. The second is integrity. I'm going to trust people and companies who have integrity. The third is dependability, which is are you going to be there in the hard times or are you going to run away? Can I depend on you on the long run, or is this just a transaction? And then finally, purpose. Do you live for something besides extracting money from my pocket? And those 4 factors broadly are things that we should consider overall as a group of people and ecosystem, because we can use that for everything. Then there's another one, which is my invention, which is the 4 factors that we should actually think about when we consider partnering and investing and buying stuff. So we have, because we are focused on the consumer and therefore on the click and therefore on the short run or therefore on the near-term ROI, we basically often see great results. Now I'm going to give you some other things that are odd and strange. If the results were so good, how come most of American companies are struggling to grow? Most of my clients are struggling to grow. And maybe my entire group is sucks, so we can't help our clients, but most of my competitors' clients are struggling to grow. The people that are growing are some of the newer companies. And in fact, if you look at all in food and packaged goods, almost all the growth is not coming from the Fortune 100. Earlier, David Fisher was here and talked about Facebook's clients. I don't know exactly how this works out, but 70% of their clients are the long tail. I think 70% of their revenue is long tail. So the reality of it is, often, many of these things that I look at, I see these charts with amazing numbers on growth, but I don't see my client growing. The analogy I use is, I'm a patient in a hospital. The monitor says I'm healthy. The only person who seems to be getting fatter is the doctor. I wonder why. Maybe we're not measuring the right thing. Right? So therefore, we should measure one more thing, or 4 more things. The first is, what is the data usage and other risks? Because that is the big thing now. And you have seen, and I don't think you've even begun to see, since I happen to be working for a European-based company, what's coming out of Europe on data fines on GDPR, right? The 50 million for Google was pittance compared to what's coming. And in the US, because our government has decided to go on vacation, the local governments are putting a patchwork of rules. And this is going to be like a hellhole if somebody doesn't take care of it, Because in effect, I'm all for capitalism and free markets. And can you imagine having hundreds of people, thousands of people just basically working on rules and regulations? So data is going to be a huge issue. The other issue that's going to be very, very dramatic is going to basically be brand reputation. So I've worked with brands for a long time, and brands are so powerful that even horrible brand managers can't kill them. I worked for great brands with terrible brand management. The brand management fortunately got fired, the brand survived, okay? Brands are very powerful. And many of these platforms that we work with across the board, and there's not one particular one, don't really understand brands that well. And to an extent, we have to manage brands, and brand risk will always remain because everything is now being whack-a-mole put together. The third is reputational risk. Young people, and I'm one of the very young people, unlike you all, are asking a very simple question. Who is funding all of this? So if this is supposed to be toxic, who's funding it? The advertisers, the marketers. And people are putting one-to-one. Okay, you talk about values and purpose and this, and what you're doing is funding this. How does that jigger up? And if you only think about the consumer, how does that jigger up? If you think about the citizen, it doesn't jigger up at all. So how do you plan that? And that's sort of the third area. And the fourth is strategic risk or strategic opportunity. Whenever you have no optionality, you have already lost. The only time you don't want to have optionality is with a husband or wife. Okay? Otherwise, you want to have optionality. What I learned from the best clients in the world is they always kept us honest because there was always someone in the wings. Everybody had triple bidding. Entire companies were built on that. Often I hear people saying, I have no choice. It's your money. It's your partnering. If you don't have any choice, you've already lost. It's a very simple strategic question. It's a boardroom conversation that's about to happen, which is why are decisions being made where you don't have an ability to make a decision. So those are some very interesting ways of looking at partnering and where you put your money, besides what the ROI monitor tells you is brand, reputation, data, and strategy. Very important. And finally, something that I've learned over the years is firms, companies, and institutions do not change just because you change code. Currently, everybody believes that all problems are going to basically be fixed with machine learning and AI. Complete and utter bullshit. I have an advanced degree in mathematics. It doesn't work that way. Okay, people out-hustle machines. They play machines. What basically happened is we figured out how to play machines. Even I know how to play the machine. And I haven't done any math for a long time. So this whole idea of, oh, we got some fix. No, the fix will be, it's going to be hard, it's going to be messy. But what's going to eventually happen is companies will change and people will change because of only one thing: the people in the company. So when someone basically says, I'm going to change the company through an M&A acquisition, I'm going to change the company through a synergy, I'm going to change the company through something like a press release, my stuff is nothing's changing. The only way a company changes is when people change. The only way an institution changes is when people change. And the last piece of advice I would give you all is the way we can actually become as an industry focusing on citizens and not just consumers, is all of us change with three simple thoughts. The first is spend at least an hour a day paying attention to something you hate. So if you love Fox, pay attention to MSNBC and don't think the people there are stupid, okay, which is number one. Number two is build a case for opposite of what you believe and then attack that versus building a case of what you believe. Because I truly believe what's gone wrong is in a connected world, we are no longer connecting. Each of us are in our filter bubbles, yelling and screaming and thinking the other person sucks. And the truth of the matter is, We all suck or we all don't suck, but it can't be everybody else sucks, which is one part of it. And finally, most importantly, do, I think, what Shimon Peres basically said, and he used to be the ex-president, now deceased, of Israel, which is think higher, feel deeper. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Wonderful.